I'm currently 22 years old and stationed on the U.S. Sapien home ported in Norfolk, Virginia. We have a couple that I've heard of. The first and most creepy is a forward animal hold. Some of the AOs, ordnance handlers, have always felt funny going into the same space. One day, a couple of the AOs went to the space with a video camera. Upon getting close to the door, a green dot appeared on the camera screen and started moving around, and yet it wasn't visible without the camera. As they got closer to the door, the dot went away. The screen turned blue then black, then the red record light went out. Later, the camera's owner thought about it and realized that if his battery died, it would have stopped all at once. Upon turning the camera back on, he had half a charge on, more than enough to keep recording. He hooked it up to a TV and watched the video with his friends at the point where the camera shut off. The video turns into pure snow, just like any other blank tape. The rest is still there. None of the AOs will go to that hold unless ordered, and they don't even go by themselves. Another sapient ghost is in an engineering space. If somebody falls asleep below decks in the engineering spaces, and nobody wakes them up, there is still somebody that does. Who is that person? Or is it an apparition? One story I've heard was that a guy was asleep, and while asleep, somebody tapped him on the shoulder. In the Navy, we generally wake up people that way, so no matter how you dare sleep, a tap on the shoulder will wake you up. Anyways, upon waking up, he sees a figure go through a door and dog it down. Curious to see who woke him up, he goes through the door and nobody is there. It's normally credited to a death that happened on board. One of the ladder wells leading down to the aft engineering spaces is where the death occurred. A sailor fell down the stairs and died, and every night, between 0100 and 0200, the watch can hear somebody falling down the stairs, but nobody is there. From time to time, people witness a figure walk out one door and into another in the engineering spaces, only to be gone upon investigation. A couple of years ago, I used to have to take the bus every day to get to work. One morning in the late summer, I was riding to work on the bus traveling down Woodward in Detroit, and I saw a man dressed entirely in a Union soldier's uniform walking down the street. At first glimpse, I didn't even think anything of it, but if I looked around to see if anyone else had noticed, and no one did, I looked towards the window again, and the guy was gone. I really don't know if it was a ghost or not, but I know he looked very real and very out of place. To me, it just seemed too hot to be wearing that uniform with the musket, cap, and everything. It all looked so very authentic. He was an African American, looked old, like in his 70s, and the uniform wasn't even clean, like you would see in a reenactment. It was dingy. I would say this happened in late August, at around 10:30 a.m. Hello everybody. I am only 13, almost 14, but I think I've experienced paranormal phenomena. The first time was when I was about 10. I'd gotten a keyboard for Christmas, and it was set up with its stool in my room. I had just gone to bed, and just happened to look at the keyboard, and a black cat weaved its way through its legs. Naturally, I went screaming to my parents, and they reassured me it was nothing. Another time I awoke to a huge face floating in front of me. Now it may have just been my imagination, but I just don't think so. On another occasion I was in the shower, and someone made a noise, like they were trying to say scary in a drawn-out voice. I am the only one in the house that believes it's haunted. Sometimes when my sister goes by to my room to get to the bathroom, she snaps at me before she enters the bathroom. Well, one time I swear I heard someone snap at me. But when I turned around, no one was there. I checked the bathroom, and my sister wasn't there. My parents were in the living room, and my sister in hers. That one happened about a month ago. All the time I feel like someone is watching me, or is in the room with me, whenever I am alone in a room, in my house, even in my own room. Sometimes when I go to bed, I even make my parents look in my closet. I have told my mother and my sister about it, and they don't seem to think anything is wrong, and I'm just paranoid. But am I really paranoid? Or am I experiencing something? I know I may be 13, but that doesn't excuse all the things that go on. I just want to be credible to people. Our house was built in 1959. To my knowledge, nothing ever bad happened here. The first time we noted anything was in the mid-1970s. We moved here in 1970. Both my husband and I awoke in the night and saw the figure of a man walk across the room at the foot of our bed and disappear. My husband jumped up and turned the light on, and then ran throughout the house looking for the intruder. No one was found. Over the years, we have heard noises coming from the bedroom areas, doors closing when they are all open. Our neighbor has seen the lights on in the middle of the night when we are asleep. A few months ago, I was standing at the bathroom sink mid-morning and saw a man walk by. I thought it was my husband, and when I walked out to see where he went, he wasn't even there. I went back down the hall, and he was still in the master bathroom and had not walked down the hall. One day we were all sitting at the table, and the four of us observed a can of Coke move across the table and stop before it fell off the edge. In the basement on the carpet, a spot just became wet, even though I was the only person down there this week. I scrubbed it up, and so far, it has remained dry. We hear the sound of our doggy door being opened and closed, even though the dog is asleep in front of us. There is far too many incidents to mention. But interestingly enough, our dog never acts like she hears any of these unnatural sounds, even though she barks at humans or dogs, etc. outside. I don't actually live with ghosts, but at my uncle's farm they have a cabin. It's going up for sale pretty soon. There is a ghost in the cabin. The funny thing is that they just built it, and no one has died in it or anything. My cousin said that the ghost is a girl that follows him everywhere. When my other cousin, my little brother, and I were watching a show in one of the rooms, then we heard footsteps walking across the floor upstairs. We tried to ignore it. Then in the middle of the movie screen went fuzzy. We all stared at the television shocked. Then my cousin screamed, and my brother and I screamed after her. We ran out of the cabin. We got to the house in 5 seconds. Apparently everyone heard us screaming, and we told them what happened, and they told us that the power probably flashed or something. But I still don't believe that. Please let me know what was going on here. Am I just freaking out, or did the whole entire family freak out? I want to tell you of an experience I had a little over a year ago. I was living in a house on Bassmaster Street in Youngstown, Ohio. I knew the house was haunted by a woman who was subdued by her husband some years before. I was a baby when she passed away. I think my room used to be her room. I never felt comfortable sleeping there, so I often slept on the couch in the living room. One night I woke up and felt like I could hardly breathe. I felt like there was a tremendous weight on me, and I couldn't move or speak except for open my eyes. I opened my eyes and saw a huge black hooded figure at the end of the couch, kinda leaning over like it was looking at me. Mind you, I couldn't see his eyes. Thank God. I instantly slammed my eyes shut and kept trying to scream, but I couldn't. Every time I opened my eyes, he was closer, till he was right over me. I took a deep breath in and started screaming. I woke my sons up. Needless to say, I got up and turned on every light in the house. I think it was death. I don't know why he came to me. Not long after my grandmother passed away, lived right next door to me. I have more stories about the apartment if you want to know. I also have a picture I believe is Teresa. That's who was haunting my house. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your website. I was staying at my auntie's home in Tasmania, where I learned very quickly the horrors of its past. Her home was built in the 1900s, when convicts first landed. Their home still has the remains of a moat, servants' headquarters, and the hospital, which it became. I went down with my grandparents. They had warned me of the presence in the home. My grandfather had seen a young girl in a long white nightgown, holding a candle, enter the spare room as she vanished before his eyes. The very first night we arrived, the fun began. I was sleeping in my cousin's room when I woke to something calling to me. As I opened my eyes, I saw two white fairies floating above me. As the light from the moon hit the room, they vanished. From that night on, as I slept, I could feel something touching my head. Around 4 days later, as we all slept, smoke filled the rooms. The strange thing was, our door was open, but nothing entered. The next morning, we awoke to find all of the display plates, which were kept in a locked cupboard, left lying on the floor in perfect order. 2 nights later, there was this huge storm, and as the dogs had puppies, they had got loose and were running in the yard. My auntie was awoken by a frozen touch on her cheek, and there was a man that stood over her and pointed out the window. Once she left the room, he vanished. A few days later, I got sick and was in the computer room with my cousin, as I wasn't allowed outside. As I stared at a doll, I swear it blinked at me. I got out of there so fast. Later on that day, I went to go to the toilet. With this house, there is one large, huge room which contains the laundry, bathroom, and the toilet. As I entered the room, the bathroom door wasn't quite shut, and I saw a man standing in there. I ran out of the room, and when my grandmother asked who was in the shower, as my cousins were in the room, my uncle and grandfather were out in the back in the shed. My grandma and auntie were in the lounge room. After a few days feeling well, I went back outside to play when I was confronted by the man in the shower. I later found out that his name was Shane, and he had once owned the home. He was found shot. Also, while playing outside hidden behind huge evergreen trees, was once appeared to be a gravesite, As I headed for the house, I saw the most gruesome sight of a man from the window under the house. Thankfully, after that day, I was heading home. They've since seen a little girl who skips around the house, and they heard the sounds of screams of pain in the rooms. I didn't hear anything like that. They did move out after that, though. When I was 7 years old, my family purchased a house in the outskirts of Los Angeles. I remember my father bragging to most anyone he knew that he got the house for a steal. I guess it didn't really matter that a stiff wind could probably knock the house on its side. It was that run down. It was a 2-level house with the main rooms being on the first floor, 3 bedrooms on the second floor, and a small fruit cellar below. When we first arrived at the house, I noticed a mailbox with a small stick-on letters that spelled out HORTON. That was the first thing my father intended to change. He pulled on some stick-on letters out of his pocket and proceeded to spell out our last name. I promise you, my father tried everything from industrial strength glue to eventually nails. Our letters would just never stay up. At some point he must have just given up, and we left it as is. As my father was valiantly trying to get those darn letters to stick, my brother and I charged ahead into the house to do some exploring. There are 2 things that stick out in my head from that initial visit. I noticed in the upstairs of the bedrooms, a dartboard hanging on the wall, with a single dart placed in the bullseye. I don't know why, but for some reason, this really disturbed me. Maybe because the entire rest of the house was completely empty. I'm not really sure. And then secondly, I noticed that most of the doors had those old-fashioned skeleton keyholes. I was instantly reminded of the old fairy tales where the wife had tried everything, including peering into a keyhole, much like this one, to get a look into that forbidden room. I bent down, placed my eye to the keyhole, and looked into one of the bedrooms. I think I was curious to know if you could easily see anything by looking into one of those things. And guess what? You can. I remember seeing something, tall and black, scurry across the floor, something that almost resembled a large dog. My father probably surmised that it was probably some type of animal, or quite possibly a shadow. In any case, I was relieved to find out that this was to be my parents' room. Almost immediately, my father began renovating plans. The entire back end of the house was to be added onto, including a new kitchen and dining room on the main level, 2 new bedrooms on the upper level, and the basement extended below. As the workmen were digging up the ground in the backyard, they uncovered many strange things, including an antique thimble set, childhood toys, coins, an axe handle, photographs, and almost an entire deck of old-maid playing cards. As my sister and I sat around thumbing through these new treasures, I happened to glance up just in time to see my eldest sister falling headfirst into the pit that was to be our new basement. To this day, my sister, who is now 40, swears she was pushed violently from behind. In any event, the result from the injury was a broken leg and a few cuts and bruises. We were all warned to be more careful around the construction site. A few days after this incident, I had a chunk of plaster thrown at my head. It could have been one of my sisters or my brother playing a trick, but they were all in their teens at the time, and I don't think they would find it funny to throw a piece of plaster at their little sister's head. Strange things were occurring inside the house as well. I constantly felt as though I was being watched, and was often plagued by feelings of absolute horror. I might be in a room playing or watching the television, when an overpowering feeling to flee the room would hit. Believe me when I say, I did just that. My sisters were constantly at each other's throats over missing items. And sometimes, those items would appear right in bizarre spots. Some were never even seen again. Lights and appliances would turn on by themselves. Footsteps could be heard in the middle of the night. Items would come crashing down in uncoupled rooms. A strange buzzing sound, almost like an electrical charge, seemed to emanate throughout the entire home, and the list goes on. We also had a problem with fires. My mother was awoken in the middle of the night by the smell of smoke, and upon investigation, she found that someone had closed the cover on her toaster oven and hit the start button with nothing being inside. This is an old 70s style oven where you actually had to press a release button to turn the power off. Otherwise, it would have just kept on going. By the time my mother reached the scene, the entire toaster was up in flames, practically burned to a crisp. That was the first of 7 fires that occurred in that house. As a child, I detested peanut butter. Even the smell of it would send my stomach churning. My brother found it amusing to consume a sandwich and then hold me down and breathe on me. Ugh, gross. Anyhow, I was sitting in the living room watching the Saturday morning cartoon marathon when my brother walked in fresh from eating a PB&J sandwich. I knew what was coming, and I wasn't in the mood for his games. A constant pounding sound that had kept me awake for half the night, and I was cranky from the lack of sleep. We began to tussle, but were abruptly interrupted from out of nowhere. An insole from a pair of shoes fell on the floor between us. We just stood there and stared at each other for a few seconds, our hands still on each other's shoulders. This insole actually seemed as though it fell straight out of the ceiling. As we were trying to figure out the origin of the peculiar item, we were startled by a loud knock at the front door from our vantage point. We could both see the front door from where we were standing. There stood an old lady with whitish hair, wearing a black shawl. Something about her eyes struck me as odd. They were so dark, it almost appeared as though someone had stuck 2 large black buttons in her eyes. As my brother approached the door, she vanished almost instantaneously, like she had never been there at all. It's not as though she simply turned and walked away. She disappeared into thin air. 1 minute she was there, and the next she was gone. I would be lying if I said we opened the front door to take a look around. We did peer out the window, checking for any signs of where she may have went. We saw nothing on the front yard, nor the driveway. My brother was convinced that we had just seen a witch. When we returned to the living room, the mysterious insole from the shoe was also missing. It's also interesting to note that a fenced-in gate surrounded our entire property. For someone to gain access to the grounds, they would need to be electronically buzzed in. This still puzzles me to this day. Oh my god. You have to get to the end of the video. You have to. I mean, obviously, if you got to this part, then you probably did get to the end of this video, but that's beside the point. Just give the video a like, and if you haven't commented in the comment section below, you gotta tell me which story that you like, and give me a whole discussion about ghosts and paranormal, and what you thought about that last story in particular. Guys, I'm doing long videos. Of course, they're not going away. I just want to give you guys like a little bit of a different video, a little bit going back to my roots, so to speak. You know, when I started the channel, I used to do 20-30-minute videos, and I'd really appreciate it if you got to the end of this video, if you wrote rock at the end of this video, or the comment section. It doesn't matter. I'm not editing this out. That way I know you're supporting the channel, you're here, you're enjoying the stories, and you like this video. So please share it on social media, give it a big fat thumbs up, and let's see how it does. A little nervous to see how this video format goes, because short form content, at least in this way, doesn't really produce results like it used to. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the stories. I love you so much, and there will be more content on the way arriving. We're doing compilations, but recorded compilations. We're doing other things, and I'm just happy because this video seems like it's gonna be cool. At least I was proud of it. So I'm always proud of everything I put out, but this in particular, I guess would be a good idea. Anyway, love you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Please share, like, comment. I want to see you in the comment section right now, and I'm gone. Until next time, love you guys.